Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Simple Living, High Thinking, where we unpack the Bhagavad Gita every week based on Tukram Prabhu's Friday night Gita class. Once again, I'm joined by Varangi Radha Devidasi and Tadeo Souza. So this week, last night's class, May 30th, we talked a lot about doing your duty. Once you achieve perfection, do you still do your duty? I thought it was a really interesting topic about leadership in our tradition and walking the walk. So what topics would you guys like to open up with or thoughts?
So in terms of the leadership of today and the events that are going on, today is May 31st, 2020 in Southern California. And there's a lot of unrest. So I think we're discussing to address a lot of the protests that are going on amidst COVID-19, which kind of makes it a real interesting time for us to be living in. And so I think, Varangi, you have a few points in mind to relate our teachings of the Bhagavad Gita to that. I'm going to start with something slightly different, and then you can lead on that train of thought. Does that work?
Sounds great.
Okay, so I want to jump in right away by saying text 14, when Krishna says, all living bodies subsists on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yagya, which is sacrifice. And yagya is born of prescribed duties. So just to give a little bit of context to where we left off and where we are, Arjuna starts the third chapter by asking Krishna again, hey, you told me to do two things, which one is best? As if Krishna had been equivocal in his instructions, which Krishna had not been. It just showed that Arjuna was having a real hard time not being able to follow exactly what Krishna was teaching. Krishna then takes a step back, recognizing that Arjuna wasn't really being able to follow, and starts explaining things from like a lower perspective. It's like, okay, Arjuna, I'm going to go back, take a step back, and start teaching you some of the more basic concepts. And then we get back to this summary, which was a much higher teaching of chapter 2. And then he starts talking about actions in the world and how you perform your actions without being attached, which obviously would fit within the larger context of what Krishna wants Arjuna to do, which is to fight in the war. So then Krishna continues to explore and unpack the intricacies of acting in the world without being attached to your duties. So that's where we are. And Krishna now is using this example of the text that I just read. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yagya, sacrifice, and yagya is born out of prescribed duties. Now, what is Krishna's intent here? By taking that step back, like we just discussed, to bring Arjuna up gradually, what Krishna is doing here, his intent is to just have Arjuna understand there's more going on in the universe than you can see with your eyes and that you are even aware of right now. First of all, you're not your body, you're spirit soul. So there's a lot more going on in the universe. And Krishna is using this example here, right? So we're talking about doing sacrifices in order to produce rain. So this is the point. I want to use this verse, the context we just brought, to jump into one of my realizations I've had this past week, and it culminated in a perfect example of this Gita class on Friday, which is the constant battle between fanaticism on science and fanaticism on religion. There are a lot of scientists, atheists, that do follow a path of being fanatic, which is to say, all there is materialism. The universe is made out of material laws, physical laws. There's matter that creates the universe ultimately. And outside of that, there's nothing else. And it is what it is. You see, what you see is what you get. Enjoy while you can, because life is short and you only live once, which things couldn't be more opposite from that point of view. Now, this is, I want to highlight here, because this is an important point for what I want to drive home right now. This is fanaticism. Not all science is done that way. Not all scientists hold that view, but there are many scientists who do hold that view, and they use science to preach materialism, which is wrong. And that's fanaticism. We can put them here on this bucket of the far right of science. Then we have fanaticism in religion as well. People, especially the Abrahamic traditions, which is to say Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the predominant religions of the West, there's a lot of fanaticism there. And part of it is actually historical. From a theological perspective, all these three major religions, their genesis is Abraham, right? So, well, the Genesis is Genesis from the Torah itself, but Abraham is essentially the grandfather of these three religions, and they do come from tribes. This is not a derogatory comment. That's just a fact. By reading the Torah, which is to say the Old Testament, they come from tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. And Jacob, Abraham, and so on, they are tribal. And they have this idea that it is our tribe versus your tribe, and it is our God versus your God. And if you don't like our God, that's enough and sufficient reasons for me to actually annihilate you. And so it's my way or the highway. So that's a tribal mentality, which contrasts with religion as it has been done historically in the East, where people are much more philosophical as opposed to tribal in their psychology, which is to say, let's abide by certain rules of logic, of reason, and discuss what is the ultimate meaning of life, what is the purpose of life, who am I, where do I come from, and etc. So that gave rise to traditions such as Buddhism, Jainism, and obviously Hinduism, which is what we are studying here in depth. This is very contrasted from this tribal, which psychologically, tribal mentality, which psychologically really leads into a fanatic point of view, which is my way or the highway. So you then find that our Hindu tradition, Buddhism, and so on, it's much more philosophical and understanding that, look, there are many different types of people in psychology and philosophy, and they all have some kind of truth. But what is the ultimate truth? What is the ultimate that we should be pursuing? So this realization I had, which I'm trying to bring it all together here, is that there's fanaticism in both sides. And if we look at the worst of religion, which is this tribal mentality of the fanatics of Western religions, it really gives a bad taste in your mouth when you talk about religion nowadays. It's almost something like, oh, it's almost like derogatory term, like, oh, you're religious. It's like this stuff. You want to paint a picture, no, I'm spiritual, because people are so almost ashamed to say, yes, I'm a religious person, you know? So there is this fanaticism on both ends, but there's also the middle ground where powerful, productive, extremely helpful science is done, to which we all benefit. Like even the technology we are using right now, Zoom, the internet, cell phones, airplanes flying through the air, so many things that we benefit, medical science, etc., that we do benefit from science when it is done right with the noble intent and a good purpose to help humanity. So this is great science. And not all of these scientists are thinking that matter is all there is, and that materialism is ultimately God, because that's where everything comes from, just matter. Forget about consciousness. We cannot prove that consciousness comes from matter, but yet, you know, some fanatic scientists are saying this is all there is matter. So also, if you come to the middle path here of very philosophical, very noble religious leaders that are not coming from a tribal mentality. My God is better than your God. There's only our way. There's only one way, and the only right way is ours. And then we find something like this. Krishna here is telling Arjuna, look, there's more than you can see. There's more than just materialism. That we're talking about doing sacrifices in order to produce yagya. Let's tell that to a fanatic scientist. They will laugh at us. Like, what? You think that you produce rain by doing sacrifice? Like, that's crazy. They'll say that's preposterous. We know how rain is created, and it has nothing to do with you doing yagya. So Krishna is kind of telling Arjuna here, look, there's a lot more going on. Like, open your mind. There's room for both science and spirituality to coexist. And that would be the ultimate benefit for human society, to embrace both from this more philosophical, less fanatic perspective. Now, I'm very blessed to not only be talking to you guys and going to guitar class and listen to Tukaram, many of our gurus, many of our books, and which brings about a lot of association, both physical and mental. Currently, I have my sister spending some time with us in our home. And again, I have opportunity to be discussing these topics. And one topic came up about is Krishna consciousness the only way? Are we saying that, if we don't accept, do we accept other paths as being bona fide or not? And again, this is part of why I started by describing these two extremes where, tribal mentality of religion, no, there is no other way. Our way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. As opposed to what we do in Krishna consciousness, which is to accept that there are other ways. And the reason why I say this is because obviously Krishna is a huge proponent of Bhakti Yoga, saying that that is the most effective way, but not the only way. And this verse is this part of the Gita where we are. Actually, not necessarily this verse, another verse I want to talk about later today, but Krishna is here talking about actions that will lead you to perfection. It's contrasted to Bhakti Yoga, which is what he ultimately prescribes, and recognizing that there is value even in Karma Yoga, if you do your duty right, that can also lead you to perfection. So Krishna now is showing here his non-fanatical approach to religion, accepting that there are other ways for you to attain higher consciousness, liberation, and the ultimate goal of life. And trying to do so here by being so merciful, by taking a step down to help Arjuna to come back up, by saying, as in this verse, there's a lot more going on. It's not just fanaticism. It's not just
Blanked out.
the other way is wrong, materialism and so on. So there's a lot more. And then it will allow Krishna to continue to expand on doing your duty first, and then the body, like adding in some philosophy to truly help Arjuna. So I wanted to use this verse here in summary, just to point out, Krishna is talking about doing sacrifices to produce rain. That's so non-scientific, right? But there is room for all of it. If we take the non-fanatical approach of science and religion and truly use both, because they're both beneficial in helping us understand who we are, where do we come from, and where should we go. There's room for materialism and also room for metaphysics to help us. And this is certainly a verse that points to metaphysical. We do not live in a world that is purely made out of matter and physical laws. We're talking about doing yagya to produce rain, so there's a lot more going on. And we can start by acting right, which is the step back that Krishna took in order to help Arjuna in this journey. So that's my opening statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tadeo. That's really beautifully said, and a really good point about how we are perceived by other religions or other people, or people who have religion in their background, and then they come into this tradition, kind of like I did, like, who are you guys? And I heard such a good lecture recently this past week by Indradyumna Swami, and he told a story. I'm going to put the link in the description because he's such a good storyteller, and it was so poignant, the story about Father Pierre. I won't ruin it with any spoilers, but just how his experiences with living in a monastery with monks who were of a different religion, different tradition. And he talked about Jesus Christ being the most perfect Vaishnav, the most perfect disciple of God, and that what he came to preach and teach, he couldn't even go into on a very deep level because the people weren't really ready to hear it. So that was really interesting to me because I'm not as well educated as you guys. So I haven't heard many of our leaders talking about their perceptions and perspectives on Jesus. So it was a nice open-minded attitude.
Yeah, I was actually listening to Indradyumna Swami, one of our predominant teachers in Krishna consciousness, extremely learned both in history of religion and theology, Sanskrit, PhD from Sanskrit in Harvard, you know, so definitely a legitimate source. And this is the point that he was making. He was actually having a debate, a conversation with many scientists, all in their PhD courses, etc. And that's the points that he was making, you know, about fanaticism. They're like, look, science has this almost bully attitude. They pick on religion and make it look so outdated and so ugly, archaic. So like, I wouldn't want to be a part of this religion that you guys are talking about. But and Indradyumna Swami points out, look, historically speaking, you guys are picking on the worst form of religion, the worst interpretation of religion. I'm not saying that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam is the worst form of religion. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is the mentality that my way is right and that there's no other way is rooted in a tribal mentality. If you go to a tribal, if like just the fact that somebody's from another tribal is enough reasons for you to try to murder them. That's psychologically speaking where these traditions arose. So the leaders, the actual creators of these religions did not embrace that mentality. In fact, Jesus Christ opened up the possibility for everybody to be a beloved of God, not just the God-chosen people, which were the ones born in the Judaism, from the pre-existing tradition that was there when Jesus was around. So in fact, he was welcoming people from other places, right? So yes, it's interesting realization from a historical point of view, the genesis of different religions, the genesis of these traditions, and how does human psychology impact how these traditions take shape in time. And if you restudy Eastern religions, you find that this tribal mentality was not there. In fact, religion and science were done side by side. That's why Prabhupada called this the science of self-realization. There's a way for us to do spiritual science. And in Eastern traditions, from long time ago, from as far as we have recorded, like hundreds of thousands of years, like Rig Veda, like a really old book. If you go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, you find harmony. People discussing philosophy deeply, trying to understand what is the nature of the universe, what is the ultimate nature of myself. And we could see that science was done alongside with religion. But for that, this fanaticism needs to be shed away. This idea that is only my way or the highway doesn't help. And yeah, this is just a very beautiful thing when you can use all of our intelligence, scientific and metaphysic, to help us, to enlighten us, to take our sufferings away and bring back our spiritual blissful nature. And we can see this here. Krishna is doing that. He's saying, hey, there's a lot more than what you just see in matter. Like rain is produced by something completely metaphysical, you know, and Krishna is like walking this line of talking about things that are metaphysical, but physical. You know, he talks about earth, water, fire, air, ether, etc. That's definitely physical, you know, but then he's talking about metaphysical. So it's a beautiful combination of both, you know.
Wonderful. What a great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, and it does segue nicely, Varangi, into what you wanted to talk about with the protests and everything going on, kind of that tribal mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, and before I guess I jump into that, because it's something that when I was going through that, those verses that we covered on Friday, I definitely saw a connection and I thought it was worth pointing out. But before I jump into that, with regards to your presentation, I thought that it's really amazing that Krishna is, when you explained that Krishna took a step back, it's really interesting and amazing to see how he's actually showing Arjuna how this is the path for a materialistic person, but that has sincerity, which I think includes most of us, you know. So we're at the beginning of the Gita. Krishna's talking about this process that helps us, you know, work in this world, be in this world, be a part of this world, but not be attached to the results. And by not being attached, we're able to offer those fruits of that labor to something higher than ourselves. And in this process, even though we're not fully purified yet, in this process, we can become purified by this regulation of offering those fruits. And I guess practicing that mentality that we're not the ultimate enjoyers, we're not the supreme enjoyers, right? That we have the right to do our duty, but not to enjoy the result of that labor. And in this way, eventually this person, this karma yogi, will come to the platform of perfection. And so what's really beautiful is that even just not even that much further away, Krishna really touches into that other option, that yeah, there's this process for a materialistic person that's sincere to make progress and achieve perfection, but also there's an option for you to transcend it all. Once you become perfect, you're no longer bound to duty. You don't have to do it. There's no purpose for you to do it, and actually there's no reason for you not to do it either. And I thought this was a wonderful and an amazing turning point, because Krishna is really showing us how complete this tradition is and how there's room for everybody. And I think that point really connects well to your presentation of how Krishna consciousness is so universal. And it's not something, it's not a matter of us versus them, this is the best, this is the only way, but it's a matter of putting things or processes in a hierarchy, right? Other processes are more direct or more effective or easier to understand and connect to than others. So it's like we're all part of the same family, but there's just different levels according to what your desire is, what you're ready to understand and take on. And I thought it was really awesome too, because Tukram pointed this out during the class, that Krishna is actually using the example of the sannyasis and the jnanis and all these other renunciants that Krishna brings up as a way to show, hey, they're actually setting an example of how to renounce this world. So it's not even like they're bad, don't do that. It's like, yeah, don't think you're ready to jump into that prematurely, but what they're doing is right because they have gone through the process. If they have, obviously each situation is unique, right? But once you've gone through this process of purification and you get to that last stage of renunciation, those people that are there are setting an example for those of us that are in this process, and this is where we need to get to, because ultimately that's the last test that we need to pass, right? Be able to renounce everything, our family, our name and fame, and everything that we've worked so hard during our life to do. And so I really appreciated that point, that Krishna is telling Arjuna there's a process for somebody that still has material desires, but this process works and will eventually lead this person to perfection. And so this leads us to verses 20 and 21. And so here, Krishna, that's where the turning point that I was talking about is stated. Krishna is giving an example of King Janaka. He was, you know, a regular king that was involved in the world, but through this process of engaging and doing his duties and not being attached to the results, he achieved perfection. And once you achieve that perfection, then you still do your duty, but now for a different reason. no longer to become perfect because you've already become self-realized, but now your purpose is to educate and lead other people on the right path. And so text 21 comes in, and this is one of my favorite texts of all time. I don't know it by heart, but I really, really want to memorize. This is one of those verses that I think that if we could remember, especially those of us that by nature we're leaders and we have that ability to, you know, impact people, make a difference, and yeah, I think draw crowds. I think we should have this mentality. And this verse, I'm going to read it. It's Krishna is telling Arjuna, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. And I thought this was wonderful because I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is such an important piece of information that I wish everybody, especially right now, because of what we're going through as a society, as in the world, but really here in the US mostly, what's going on is it's crazy. I mean, we've seen a lot of injustice, which isn't just recently. Obviously, this comes from hundreds and hundreds, I mean, thousands of years ago. But that is finally culminating in these days, obviously being highly enhanced by the fact that we've been in quarantine, that we've been isolated, that there's so much anxiety and fear, that there's so much lack of knowledge and philosophy, which is what Zoza was talking about. There's a lot of fanaticism. There's a lot of identifying with our body, thinking that we are this skin, that we are this race, that we are this gender. And because of that misconception, we see the crazy things that are happening today. All these hate crimes, all these riots, this protests that start for a higher purpose, but then they degrade really fast because these are people, and most of us are just not controlled. We don't have this knowledge. And maybe if we have encountered this knowledge, it's much harder to put it into practice when when that materialism kicks in, right? Because I think that's more of a default position for a lot of us. And so it's like, I'm cool and I'm zen as long as you don't step in too close, right? As long as you don't attack my family, as long as you don't take my job away, as long as you don't kill one of mine. But as soon as that happens, then, you know, religion goes out the way, the morals go out the way, and I'm just gonna act to defend and survive, and I don't care. Now it's us versus them till the end. And so when reading through these verses where Krishna is now raising that explanation of this process, I was really thinking about how valuable the Bhagavad Gita is for anybody, and especially nowadays. So taking this verse particularly and thinking how much responsibility we have as leaders. And even if you don't think you're a leader, even if you don't think that's your nature, even if you don't think you're really making a difference, think again. I mean, we're always influencing other people and being influenced by other people all the time, quietly or loudly, you know, through social media, or even in just our own, the way that we act, the way that we talk, the way that we express what we think. And so we have a huge responsibility to become people of honor, you know, to come to that platform of perfection. And it's crazy because I've always thought, I hate that word of perfection. It's like, we're human. Of course, we're always going to make a mistake. We're never going to be perfect. And what we're here is like, actually, no, there is a point that if you do the work, you can get to a point or a platform of perfection. And what that looks like is that you no longer see yourself or others from a material perspective, from the body, from the skin color, from the gender, from nationality, or anything like that. And so there is that platform of perfection. And Krishna saying, you know, if you do this work, which is this process is available to everybody, you will get here. And once you get here, you have the duty of continuing to act in this way, in a regulated way, in a moral way, in an honorable way, in a way, in a lifestyle of integrity, because other people are looking up to you, and you need to set this example. And I'm thinking, are my leaders, and when I say my leaders, I'm thinking about local governments, you know, activists that stand up and lead so many people, just everybody that has a voice and can draw crowds, are they this type of person? And sadly, my own conclusion, and I think it would be really hard for anybody to have a different conclusion, is no. A lot of these people, myself included, we're not in that category where we can see clearly, first of all, who we are, but also what our duty is, how we should live in this world, and even less, how to offer the fruits of that labor to something higher than ourselves, right? And so that was a difficult, I think, realization, because it really requires action, and it requires commitment, and it requires for you to get out of your comfort zone, for me to get out of my comfort zone. And instead of just reposting things that, you know, videos of terrible, horrible things that have been happening lately, it just would require us for us to do the work inside, behind closed doors, when nobody's looking, you know. And that's just a little harder, because you're not going to get any likes for that. You're not going to get any new followers for that. You're probably not going to be very liked by your family members or your friends or your whatever circles you hang out with. Why? Because that in itself is the biggest revolution. And it doesn't require, or it actually doesn't need any public exposure. This is something that happens internally. And so I was thinking back about what made me start on this path of, you know, learning about the Bhagavad Gita, hanging out with people that are also trying to live this lifestyle. And I remember that I was, you know, in Cal State Long Beach.
Hey, Varangi, can you please hold that thought for a moment?
Yeah.
I want to
Go ahead.
acknowledge something you said, which is so strong. I want to highlight that, and before you move on, to embrace these values you just mentioned and be different from your society, not care about the likes in social media, or perhaps even your family, is indeed the battle, which is what you said, is indeed a revolution. Plato said, perhaps better than anybody have heard, that it takes more courage for you to examine the dark nature of your inside than it does for a soldier to fight in a battlefield. And that's why a lot of people don't do it. You are absolutely correct when you make that point. It is more difficult to do that. Embrace higher consciousness and act accordingly, because you're not going to be so liked by others. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult to do that. And yet is what we're doing. That is indeed the main revolution that needs to take place. So please continue. I just want to highlight that.
Thank you. Yeah, that definitely, that beautifully summarizes that point. And yeah, I was just thinking back about my humble beginnings, and, you know, I was in college, and my purpose, I wanted to change the world, and I still do, but that was like why I was going to college. I wanted to be able to do justice and to help people that don't have a voice and to really make a difference. And then I started hearing about the Bhagavad Gita on I think it was my last year of college or my last semester. And I couldn't understand how, after so much money and time and effort, I was learning more about really deeper things from a book that I had never heard of before, and from somebody that was just my age, that, you know, he wasn't like 100 years old and wisdom was just, you know, something that he had come up with. He was actually this person that introduced me to this path. Darshan, one of our dear friends, who was introduced by you, Sosa. He was sharing these topics about the Bhagavad Gita, and I thought, oh my God, this is the real revolution. Like, here I am trying to like study all these things like economics, and it's not to say that it's bad and you should drop out of school or anything. I got my degree. I'm a professional. I'm working outside. You both, you know, Kim is working on her PhD right now. You know, so it's great. Education is great. It's wonderful, but it really doesn't replace using your intelligence. The fact that you have 10,000 certificates from the best universities doesn't replace the fact that you need to use your intelligence and your free will and like you said, that scientific method to realize who you are and who's that source of everything, which is the best education, the highest education. So going through this, going through my memory lane, and remembering how it was about all these different things that were wrong in the world and how I really wanted to tackle them all and solve them all. And then coming in contact with this knowledge that was like, actually, the biggest thing, the biggest impact you can make is to change yourself, to work on yourself, to become self-realized, is the biggest revolution, was revolutionary for me. I was like, oh my God, I can just do one thing and this will actually help me work on all these other things that are wrong with the world. And it's actually so true. And you know, not much time has passed, but in the little time that I have been practicing this, I have seen such a big difference. I mean, it's really difficult to see so much hatred and war and injustice and just people killing each other for something that is difficult to, I think, even describe, because so many things just, yeah, like everything just kind of gets faded and it's like you no longer can say, oh, we're fighting for this, because there's just so many other things that are also playing a part. It's so hard to sit with that. But I think once you have a little bit of this knowledge of what this world is, who you are, and who the source of everything is, you know, those three components, you really can start seeing the world in a more clear way and not get so entangled in the mob mentality. Tukram was talking about that in another class yesterday, that it's so crazy how trendiness can make you believe that you're fighting for the right reason when in fact you're just going with the flow that may not necessarily be the right war to fight, you know? So anyway, to get back on track, yeah, I think that that was a point that I really appreciated about this section that we just covered about the Gita, and that Krishna saying, you know, just to summarize this part or my comment, look, Arjuna, you have to act. Action is required. And you also should use your intelligence. You should use the knowledge that you're getting, Sankhya, Buddhi, and connect it to action, because that's the way, that's the highest way to live in this world. So you act, and then if you are sincere and you want to make progress, then you offer the results of that action to something higher. Something higher could be the demigods. Demigods in Western society could be, I mean, they could be seen in so many different ways, but we do understand through our tradition that there's different personalities that take care of different aspects of life. And you mentioned the rains and how there's that beautiful cycle of offering something back. That's the sacrifice part of it, to be benefited in a different way by a higher being. And eventually in this cycle, we connect, or that karma yogi connects to the Supreme. And in this way, our consciousness is purified, and then we get to a platform of perfection. Once we get there, we still do our duty, because we have to set the example for other people that are looking up to us and who are following our example. Therefore, it's so important for us to walk our talk, for us to invest in cleaning up our act, so that we can actually make a difference and lead others through the path of truth, as opposed to my own personal interests that will inevitably come into play if we're not careful. Then and I'm just moving the conversation forward at this point, obviously it'd be awesome if you jumped in, but then Krishna sets himself as the supreme example. And here he's hinting at how he's God again. And he had done this in the second chapter earlier also. But here Krishna's saying, you know, I even act under prescribed duties. I practice prescribed duties, because if I don't, then what example am I setting for the rest of the world? The societies are going to be degraded, and I'm going to be responsible for that. And so that just shows how Krishna it's all good, right? All powerful. Is also presents the, I think, good question and a problem that I'm sure Zosa's gonna help us reconcile is, well, then God is under the law, right? God is, the law is above God, and God has to act just like any regular human being would have to act under these laws and regulations in order for everything to be okay. And so if you could please help us understand how that would be a solution to this question, because certainly that does come up. If Krishna imposes himself as the supreme example, does that mean that the prescribed duties are above him, and even him, he is under or subjected by these rules?
Thank you for leading us to this question. Very wonderful question. Before I answer that, I want to go back to the many points. I was silently listening to you speak, and
sorry, I talk so much.
Interrupt you in so many points that you made, and but I wanted to allow you to elaborate on your thoughts. If I was listening to us, this podcast today, I would ask myself, well, we're talking about doing our duties to serve as an example. I would be asking myself, well, what is my duty? I know so many people have that question. Well, what should I, like, what is my duty? What must I do? Like a lot of people, you know, go to university, get a degree, and then don't end up working on it. It's like that highlights such a confusion, like what should I do, right? So I want to touch on that. So what is our duty? We're talking about acting in the right way, doing our duty in the right way, to the extent to which we can achieve perfection. So the begging question is, oh, what is my duty? Then what should I do? We're talking about here these sacrifices that you can perform to make it rain and so on. We have an understanding that this approach is more applicable to a previous higher civilization where they were yogis, self-controlled, and they had a much deeper understanding of reality. And they could perform all these esoteric practices. In this day and age, the main sacrifice, the main duty we should embrace, as it is described in our scriptures, is the sacrifice of mantra meditation. So we recite our Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The main sacrifice, Krishna will say, of all sacrifices, I am the chanting of mantras. So that is the sacrifice that leads into saying our duty as well, because these are the actions that I do in order to attain the highest possible version of myself, so that I can set the example so that others can follow, like you're saying, Varangi. So another point that's going to highlight this point is that today's turmoil truly reminds me of what Prabhupada was facing when he was a youngster like we are right now in India, which is Gandhi and what he was doing, the tremendous political turmoil that was going on in India at that time. And Prabhupada was a follower of Gandhi. He wanted to join Gandhi's movements and go deep into the political unrest and all this stuff that was going on. And when he met his guru, whose mercy we all benefit today, he's in the very first encounter they ever had, Prabhupada's guru told him, you are an intelligent man, you should go preach in the West. Prabhupada's response was, who will listen to me? If we don't have our freedom from the British, who will listen to us? We are dominated by another country. Shouldn't we first get our independence, take care of all of our political unrest, all of this cultural nonsense that is going on, that Gandhi is leading? Shouldn't we do that first, and then as free people, we go and preach our spiritual wisdom to the rest of the world?
And that makes so much sense, right?
What an excellent question. To which Prabhupada's guru responded, you should never care for what matters the least before you care for what matters the most. What matters the most is our spiritual identity, who we are eternally, not who we are temporarily. Our race, our gender, our social, psychological statuses, those things matters the least. They're temporarily and they end. What matters the most is who we are eternally as spiritual souls. And that was Prabhupada's Guru's instructions. What matters the most is the message of Bhagavad Gita. The true message of any true religion who teaches us we are spiritual souls, part and parcel of God. We should know and love that God. That's what truly matters. From any religion that teaches that, from anybody who gets that, that's what matters. That's what we should focus on. Even if all this turmoil is going on, whether it's COVID or the injustice done to George Floyd because of $20 and all the stuff that is going on, yes, we should care about that, but in an intelligent way, like you mentioned, Varangi, in a way that I show the righteous, true example for others to follow, which will automatically make me a noble person. If I become the best version of myself, which is all the intelligence within my spirit, within the core of who I am, naturally I will lead, naturally I will send the best example, naturally people will follow, but not through what you also mentioned. What is the cause we're fighting for? We don't even know what we're doing now anymore. Like, is it this? It started as this, but now is that. Some people in LA are having their stores vandalized for something that happened in Minnesota. They had nothing to do with that. So it's like, what is even going on right now? We don't even know. We don't even know what true cause to fight for. So to bring these 2 points together, the right action is that action that makes you the best person. Independence of everything else you're going on, whether you're doing a PhD like Kim is doing, whether you have your own business like I have, whether you translate for courts like you do, Varangi, it's those things are gonna go on. The soul is restless. The soul has to always do something. We're always gonna be doing those things, but we're gonna be doing those things temporarily. And we are eternally spiritual souls. That's the best version of ourselves. So our duty is to realize that, to find that. The best way to do that is by performing these sacrifices. If you're going to act as karma yoga, the actions is the actions of the sacrifice. The best sacrifice for us right now in this day and age, as it is taught in our scriptures, is the sacrifice of japa, which means to chant mantras, sacred names of God. Hallowed be thy name, which is the mantra that we just chanted earlier. So that is our duty, to become the best version of ourselves, chanting and being better and showing an example so that we can hopefully be able to bring peace. And from peace, your intellect can be developed, your happiness can be developed, the best nature of yourself can be developed. So anyways, I just wanted to bring those points as I was listening to you talk around, all those things are bubbling up in my mind. I wanted to spit it out as well.
And this is so important. Thank you for making that pause and for explaining that. I think also it's natural for somebody, you know, the activists that are passionate of making a difference, you know, that intention is pure, that intention is good, but then the way that it's being executed may not be without this work that you're mentioning. And so for somebody on the outside that hasn't really dived into spirituality, I think it's very easy for them to say, well, you guys are selfish, you guys are not doing anything. A spiritualist just sits and like works on himself and it's all happy internally, but then meanwhile the world is going to hell. Like, what are you doing about it? And so I think that this is a great answer for that question. It's actually, you are doing something by engaging in a serious, non-fanatical, very systematic, scientific, philosophical study of spirituality, because you're investing in becoming a better person yourself, and in this way you can actually see things clearly and help others at the same time. Is that?
Absolutely. Look at what Prabhupada did. Amidst all that turmoil that was going on around Gandhi, he did work to himself, because you cannot give what you don't have. So first you have to have it yourself by becoming the best version of yourself. Then you can give to others. It took Prabhupada decades to finally come. And he always kept true to his guru. He said, you know, in my heart, I accepted him as my guru the very the very first day I met him. But then for the following decades, Prabhupada spent working on himself, working internally, becoming the best version of himself. And then he came to the West and performed the greatest of the miracles, which is to bring people from different nations, people from different backgrounds, people from different religious cultures, all in one house, the house of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That is a true miracle. He was once asked, hey, Swamiji, there are all these gurus and all these people that are coming from India and they have all these mystical powers. There's this one guru who can make an apple appear. And what can you do? What is your mystical power? To which he responded, you know, before I came, none of these temples for the International Society of Krishna Consciousness existed. But then now they are all here. And if you go inside of each one of these temples, you see so many apples. What to speak of one? There's so many apples in there. They were not there before. But furthermore, you know, we see, like, look at the three of us here, right? We have an Asian and Latin and an African. And we all talking about the same thing. That is a true miracle. We have families from the same culture, from the same psychological, social, or intellectual background that break because they don't know how to live under one roof. What you speak of bringing together many different cultures, many different races, many different intellectual, social, and psychological backgrounds into under one name, the name of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is a true, factual answer to the question, Varangi. It is a miracle. It does work. He did that work himself. And then he came and gave it to all of us and gave a tremendous amount of peace and clarity and intelligence to all of us. And we all
he led by example.
Led by example. And we are all different. And we're all here talking about Krishna. I mean, we all had a Krishna background. I'm from Brazil, Varangi, you're from Colombia. Kim, you were born in the US, right?
No, born in Korea.
Oh, you were born in Korea.
But I was adopted when I was a baby, so I kind of basically grew up here.
I see. But again, you know, here we are all talking about this one Hindu path, right? Which had nothing to do with our original upbringing, because there's truth in it, because we wanted to go deeper. We found that deeper truth, right? So Prabhupada is the example of that. Amongst the turmoil of Gandhi, he never took what matters the least instead of what mattered the most. He did the work himself. He chanted all of his mantra. He did everything he needed to do, and then came here as he didn't have to. He was in the highest, most noble place in our tradition in India. That's like he was living there, an accomplished sannyasi. He did not have to leave. He left at such an advanced age in a cargo ship. It breaks my heart to just think that. Had 3 heart attacks for like over a decade. I've been thinking he had 2 heart attacks and just not realize it was actually 3. He had 3 heart attacks just to give this knowledge to people that he didn't even know. And what an example. And then what he did there are hundreds of temples all over the world, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people benefit from this tremendous knowledge that he's giving us. Our lives has all been changed and touched by it. And
that's real philanthropy, right?
Exactly. And it shows and it highlights the nature of a devotee. He was not lazy, like you mentioned, Varangi. He was not just sitting there, not caring about anybody. If he was selfish, only caring about himself at such an advanced age, he was 68, I believe.
9, I think.
69. At such an advanced age, he had achieved the highest perfection within our tradition. He could just be there and live his body peacefully. Instead, he came to New York in the snow. He never seen snow before. He didn't have $20 in his pocket. He had nothing. And just to not only set an example, but to show the indirectly, right? He was showing the tremendous compassionate nature of true spiritualists, which we are striving to become, you know, and that is a tremendous revolution, a revolution that actually changes the world, you know. Anyways, I get very passionate about this because it's
I love it.
It's what we need, you know. It's not only for ourselves, but for the rest of the world. And it's based on true knowledge. You know, it has this scientific power. We can see all these temples were not there. Now they are because of Prabhupada's following what Krishna is doing in Gita. Krishna is talking about in Gita. Okay, let me take a
Yeah,
deep
it's
breath
like
now.
it's like, you know, it's not that spiritualists don't have passion. They're not committed to a cause. They do. It's just the purpose is for the supreme
Yes.
cause of all causes. So if you're like, it's an example given in our text, it's amazing. It's like you water the root instead of watering every single leaf on the tree. You water the root, and naturally the whole tree will blossom. Every leaf will be nurtured. It's the same way. So a spiritualist is not lacking energy, purpose, passion, commitment. It's like just hearing you speak, it's like, oh my gosh, you sound like an amazing activist, but you're giving information that will benefit anybody and everybody at all times, forever and ever, because you're talking about the information that has to do with spiritual realization, self-realization, the perfection that Krishna is talking about in the Gita. And so if we can channel all those qualities that we naturally have, but for Krishna, for God, for the Supreme, then we're in that perfected state, right? Even though we still have materialistic desires, even though we're still in the process, we're connecting ourselves, our nature, our qualities, our resources, our families, everything to that supreme cause or mission. Then everything gets it's sacred, right?
That's right.
By association,
That's
by
right.
osmosis, we make everything sacred by connecting, dovetailing
That's right.
all of our activities to that supreme purpose
That's
and
right.
person. Okay.
Now, let's go from activism and some philanthropy back to philosophy, because I cannot leave your passion hanging. And I know we have limited time, so I'll try to do it.
Let's do it.
And
Let's do it, because we
let's get into it.
can't move on.
So let's talk about Plato first. The Platonic philosophy. Are things good because the gods love them, or do the gods love them because they are good? That's a Platonic question.
The useful dilemma, right?
Correct. So to unpack that, the implications are, if the gods love things that are good, then things being good precedes God. It is something that God looks up to, and God says, look at that good thing, and I will love that because that thing is good. But that thing that is good was there before, and therefore God is secondary. Or are things good because the gods love them? Well, then now God is first, and God loves certain things, and due to the fact that God loves these things, then these things are good. So now God is primary. So that's the dilemma, right? Are things good because gods love them, or God love them because they are good? So the reason why I start with this in order to answer your question is because the question you posed was, or the question that is begging by reading this text in Gita is, well, wait a minute, Krishna is saying, hey, I'm performing my duties. So is Krishna subject to the performance of duties? Because if he is, then duties are above Krishna, because Krishna has to perform his duties himself. And if he's the ultimate supreme controller, supreme free being, then he's not going to be forced to do or perform any duties. So then the question is Krishna being forced to do his duty? Or he's saying he's doing them to teach others? That is the question, right, Varangi? I want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So the point is that duties, they are secondary to Krishna. Duties comes from the Vedas. The Vedas is Krishna. So the point that you perform your duties is to upbring you, to make you better. But then you can, like you even mentioned earlier, Varangi, you can also transcend these duties to the point where duties will end for you because it became perfect at performing your duties in the world. And then for that person, their duties have ended. Nevertheless, they will continue to act to benefit others, like we're talking about Prabhupada and song. So the Krishna here is therefore the personification of these dutiful acts that leads to the higher version of ourselves. So Krishna himself is the righteous benefits of performing these duties. So Krishna is not under the duties, but instead Krishna, these duties becomes who you are. If you are devotee and if you act properly, is in your bones to then care for others and set a good example for others. And that is the result of the duty, the right duty. And Krishna is doing himself. He is the right duty. He acts in the way that he is his nature. And that is the right action, that is the right duty. So when Krishna says, I am acting according to prescribed duties, he's actually saying, I'm acting according to myself. He's the personification of those right duties. The right duty and Krishna are non-different. So he's doing that, he's doing himself. Let's say if we're born in America and we speak English, it's not that I am subject to speak English. I'm speaking English because English is what I speak. It's just who I am. I'm doing my nature. If I am fire, I am hot, and light and heat emanates from me. It's not
essential.
It's essential. It's who I am. Is if I am fire, I'm not thinking, today I want to give light out, but tomorrow I may not because I'll be moody, or tomorrow I'm not going to put out as much heat. You have no choice. If you're a fire, light and heat is going to emanate from you. If you are Krishna, you are right action personified. And right action personified is what we mean by right duties. So when Krishna says, I am performing these duties, he's saying, I'm doing me. Krishna is keeping real to himself.
Yeah, and then that component of compassion, like I'm doing this prescribed duties because if I don't, then everybody else is gonna suffer. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So it's like, that's his nature. He's like goodness personified. He wants to help us. He can because he's the supreme person. Therefore, he's going to do it. And so, yeah, there's nobody above him. He's the supreme everything. Therefore, duties, goodness, justice, like you said, morality, everything comes from him. You can only get variety. You know, you can have different ones from variety. You can't get nothing. Variety cannot come from nothing. So in that same way, from the Supreme, who's the source of everything, all these different beautiful qualities, things that we aspire to have and we value, he is the personification of those.
So
is that correct?
Almost had it right.
Right.
But it's kind of like the Yusufa dilemma is kind of like not either one of them precisely. It's not that things exist outside of God and they're good and God looks up to them and say, oh, that's a good thing, I'm going to like that.
Right.
That's not it, because then things would be above God. But then also not that God, the things are good because God loved them. There's a difference. There's something there, and then God loves that thing, and then that thing becomes good. It's also not, it's closer, but it's not precisely. It's not that is a separate thing that God loves, and therefore it becomes good, and is right. that thing that is good and God himself are one. They're none different. God is the personification of those things.
Right.
So
thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you think, Kim? It's very clear, right? He passed
very clear.
Our question.
Yeah. Yeah. And both of your topics today, the realizations, I've just been sitting here just loving it. You've both explained it in a very easy to understand way and highlighted what I thought were, very applicable ideals that we can use in our lives.
One more thing, I have to say it. So Varangi, the last verse you just read about, which text is that again? About Krishna saying, if I didn't perform my duties, I would disturb people's peace. Which one
Yeah,
is
I
that?
believe that is 24. Verse
24.
24.
If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put into ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. We get a glimpse into Krishna's nature here. When we say God is all good, God is all powerful, God is all merciful, all that sounds very nicely. But here you can see in Krishna describing himself, we can get a glimpse into Krishna's nature. Krishna wants us to be peaceful. Krishna wants us to prosper, to the extent that he is performing prescribed duties. He doesn't have to. He's God. He's not obliged to do any of this, but yet he's doing. That's what it means. That's what we mean when we say God is all merciful and God is all good. He's doing it so that we can follow, so that we can see what's right, what's left from right. And look to the extent, look what he's saying. He's pouring his heart out. He's saying, I care about you being peaceful, which is the contrary to what we see today on our streets. Krishna is saying, I care about that. He loves us. He wants us to be peaceful so that we can have a clear mind. And therefore, he's doing things he doesn't even have to do, just so that our peace is kept. And we have that as a platform from which we can become the best version of ourselves. Such is the loving nature of Krishna.
Beautiful. And this really highlights how important it is. And I brought this point up, I think maybe even last episode, that the tradition that we decide to follow, the process that we decide to follow, the religion, whatever you call it, paying attention to what the conception of divinity is so important, because that's eventually where we're headed.
Exactly.
And here, like you're mentioning, we get a glimpse of how compassionate that Supreme Person is, how sweet, how loving, how committed he is for us to become happy and help other people become happy. It's like, we want to be like him. And if we're in this process, we're certainly moving in that direction,
Right.
And so it's so important if we are in a tradition where we are following duties and regulations or instructions that incite us to go out and be unjust and be unkind and be mean and be terrible and inflict pain on others for no other reason than it's us versus them, then that should tell you something.
Yes.
And so it's really important. It's like we actually have so much power. We have to use our intelligence to make the right choices. And the knowledge is there. It's coming. We're like, distributing this knowledge freely, or, like on the streets. This is what a lot of the devotees do. Give these books out, have these conversations, have these podcasts, have classes, invite people. So like the knowledge is out, that the secret's out, but it's up to us to really consciously and sincerely turn towards that and really put those lessons into practice, apply them, and then try it out for ourselves. But this is the leader we're following. Krishna is that leader. This is what we're aspiring to become. And you really mentioned a beautiful point. That's exactly it. And dang, we're in the right place at the right time with the right people.
Yes.
So fortunate.
And I appreciate everything you guys said about the nature, what your nature is, what Krishna's nature is. And when it comes to the protests or doing your duty, what job do you want to do in the world? There's like certain people, when it comes to the protests, certain people are going to be the warrior type, are going to be out there, leading the charge, and other people like the merchant type or the student type are going to be taking different roles. But the common theme is that ideally you are surrendered to something higher than yourself, the bigger yes. So, and then you can find your role in whatever the situation may be, finding purpose. So we are out of time, but thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. I know I was just sitting here learning so much, and Are there any closing thoughts
Here.
before we sign out?
I think we left it all out there today.
Yeah, I agree.
That's great. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you
Thank you,
guys. And we'll see you next week. So thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for joining us on Simple Living, High Thinking. Please subscribe as new episodes post every Monday. You can tune into this podcast live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Check out our website for more details at simplelivinghighThinking.net. And if you would like to nominate someone for a devotee spotlight interview, contact us via our website at simplelivinghighThinking.net.